And welcome back, rugby fans, to Rugby411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata, and this is our preview of Pool A for the 2023 Rugby World Cup. Now, this pool is probably the easiest pool to predict the top two teams to come out of the pool after round robin pool play. Your five teams in this pool are New Zealand, fourth rank in the world, France third rank in the world, Italy number 13, Uruguay 17, and Namibia 21. So just looking already at the lineup, again, it's pretty easy to determine which two teams will make it out. Barring any kind of upset, but kind of really doubt it. One very important game, of course, is the very first game that's kicking off the Rugby World Cup. That's going to be this Friday, September 8th, New Zealand versus France. That will be dynamic. It will be exciting. It's interesting that is going to be the game to kick off pool play. It will kick off 12:15 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Friday. So again, you can watch it all live or on demand on the Peacock Network. Let's go through the teams here to give you a little preview. So let's start with the three-time Rugby World Cup winners, New Zealand, only one of two teams to have the Rugby World Cup, to lift the Ellis Cup three times next to their Southern Hemisphere rival, South Africa. It's New Zealand, the All Blacks. Head coach is Ian Foster, who was the assistant head coach for New Zealand from 2012 to 2019. So he served on the 2019 Rugby World Cup as well as the 2015 team, and then was promoted to head coach in 2020. In that 2019 Rugby World Cup, which took place in Japan, they were 3 wins, no losses, 1 draw, because the game against one of the games they had to call that they couldn't do because of, unfortunately, the horrible effects of Typhoon Hagibis. In the quarterfinals, New Zealand defeated Ireland, and then in the semifinals, they lost a very close game to England, 19-7. The news going on right now with New Zealand is, unfortunately, the last game that they played right before the Rugby World Cup, so the last test match, they lost to their Southern Hemisphere rivals, South Africa, 35-7, which, sometimes you have these games which are, New Zealand will win or South Africa will win. They're very back and forth. But to have a victory or a loss that lopsided for New Zealand really said a lot. It's what dropped New Zealand down to the number 4 spot. It actually allowed South Africa to go up to the number 2 spot in the world rankings. So again, rugby is all about momentum. I talk about it all the time. And going into this Rugby World Cup, definitely the momentum is a little bit not behind New Zealand. But other than that, most things are pretty much what New Zealand does in rugby. They were this year's rugby the Rugby Championship tournament winners. That is the biggest tournament in the Southern Hemisphere. It involves New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina, and Australia. This is their 6th Rugby Championship out of the last 7 years. So the All Blacks have been pretty dominant. It's just, again, this last game against South Africa, kind of a head-scratcher. And hopefully it doesn't reflect too much on the team as they go into the Rugby World Cup. Now, a few injuries for New Zealand. No Joe Moody. Bauer's injured as well. But also no George Bridge on the center position, which definitely takes a lot of veteran play out of that back half of the team. But again, lots of star players, lots of experience. You got Dane Coles, hooker for New Zealand. His is going to be his 3rd World Cup. Brody Retallick, 103 caps under his name as an All Black. Will be his 4th World Cup, as well as Sam Whitlock, who has been a All Black since forever. 146 caps. That is astounding. This will also be his 4th Rugby World Cup. Scott Barrett, who is one of 3 of the Barrett brothers, along with Bowden and Jody, will also be playing on the team this year. Of course, their captain will be Sam Kane, Artie Savea, who are both veteran forces in the back row. They have probably the most talented backs that you can ask for, of course, Aaron Smith, who is going to be their scrum half. This will be his third World Cup. As I mentioned before, the scrum half position is kind of always characterized as almost being the same as a Chihuahua. It's usually one of your smallest players, but one of your loudest players on the field. Aaron Smith definitely loves to talk a lot of trash, but he is also one of your smart, strategic tacticians on the pitch. And Aaron Smith is definitely one of those. Very crafty, very elusive, hard to tackle. He scores a lot of tries for a man his size. And of course, your fly half position for New Zealand, I think, are the best fly halves of any team in competition. Beaudein Barrett, one of my favorite rugby players of all time, with 116 test caps under his belt. This will be his third World Cup. And then, of course, behind them, the very young, talented Damien McKenzie and then Richie Mo'unga. Both of them super, super talented. Easily going to be the successors to Beaudein Barrett. And then, of course, the third Barrett brother, Jody Barrett, will be in the center. David Havili, Reiko Ioane. Granted, again, the center position, a little bit lack of depth because of George Bridge not playing, deciding to spend his... to call it a day for his international career, focusing more on his career in France on the club level. And then, of course, the very talented young Caleb Clark, only 18 caps under his belt, but definitely a future superstar for the All Blacks. That is the All Blacks team. Then we will move on to France, the host team of this Rugby World Cup. All the games will be taking place in France. They are number 3, and man, with the exception of what just happened recently to the roster, France was going into this Rugby World Cup strong again. A lot of momentum. They are the home team. They honestly have been playing really, really well. If you watch a lot of the competitions on the club level, especially with the top 14, which is the biggest pro league in France, and their involvement with the European Rugby Cup, which involves top 14, Premiership Rugby, and the URC, usually a French team ends up winning the European Rugby Cup. It has been for at least the last 5 years. It is really, really impressive. France has become a huge rugby powerhouse. They are, again, number 3 right now rugby in the World Rugby Rankings. Head coach right now is Fabien Gultic, who has been the head coach since 2019, a former player. He's taken over for the French team going into this Rugby World Cup cycle. Recently, even though they did lose to Scotland on August 5th, they've been on a little bit of a hot streak. They had the rematch August 12th, defeating Scotland, August 19th, defeating Fiji 34-17, and then defeating Australia 41-17, a landslide victory over Australia, which, of course, as I mentioned in my video previewing Australia, they are having some issues right now with their new head coach, Eddie Jones, and a lot of backstage problems with that team. Now, with the French, though, unfortunately, some huge injuries. First of all, Cyril Bailey, who is one of their strong veteran props, is unfortunately injured, though there's talk that he may come back. Anthony Jellock, who is a lock, is also hurt as well, but apparently he may come back, at least for the second game of the Rugby World Cup. But it's the big, big injury that really made a lot of people rethink their thoughts if France would end up winning this Rugby World Cup. One of the youngest and brightest stars, not only in France, but in the rugby world, Romain Ntamack. I mean, this kid is the future of rugby. He and his co-teammate Antoine Dupont, both of them are young superstars. They are the dynamic duo. The reason why France has become such a strong rugby nation, because those two players are generational talent. They're really, really good. Romain Ntamack getting hurt and the loss to Scotland, man, couldn't come at a worse time. Like I mentioned before, France was up there as like almost the guaranteed winner in this Rugby World Cup, being the hosts, being as strong as they are. The odds have kind of hedged a little bit now for France, but still, despite the loss of Romain Ntamack, the team is still favored to win by a lot of people's accounts. I don't know, in my opinion, if they'll definitely get far. I wouldn't be surprised if they make it to the finals. I don't know if they'll win, though. Romain Ntamak is a huge reason why France is successful. Matthew Jalabert, who will be the replacement fly half on the team, has big shoes to fill. But of course, he still has Antoine Dupont, his scrum half cohort, who will be working for France. You have Gaël Fickou, who is one of the veteran members of the team at center. Damien Pinard, who is a young, dynamic winger. And then Thomas Ramos, who is also a very young fullback. The team has a lot of depth. They have a lot of talent. But man, the loss of Romain Ntamak, and then of course Cyril Baye and Anthony Gillock. I mean, apparently Anthony and Cyril may be coming back at least by the second game, but man, that means they're going to be missing out on that first game against New Zealand, which, granted, them losing that game doesn't really change too much because, again, I don't think they're going to lose to Italy, Uruguay, or Namibia. That would be huge to lose to those three teams at home in France. But more than likely, even if they lose to New Zealand, they'll sweep the other three teams, and then New Zealand will go off into pool play. By that time, hopefully, Cyril and Anthony Gillock will be back on the roster. Now, going on to Italy. Italy, ranked number 13. Italy is one of those teams... they were originally a second-tier nation after a phenomenal performance in the 2011 Rugby World Cup. They were able to be pushed up to first-tier nation status. They joined the Six Nations competition. They've gotten a lot of hype, but unfortunately, since then, they've struggled a lot. I think they've only won maybe one or two matches in the Six Nations competition since joining almost over a decade ago, and they've really been kind of the punching bag to a lot of Tier 1 nations. They've been able to defeat, of course, Tier 2 nations, but they haven't really progressed any higher since being pushed up into Tier 1. They are ranked number 13, one of the lower Tier 1. I think they're still ranked the lowest, next to Japan, unfortunately, one of the lowest Tier 1 nations in the rugby rankings right now. And I don't feel they'll do much in this rugby competition except for beating up on Uruguay or Namibia. Let's go over the coaching staff. Head coach is former New Zealand player Kieran Crowley, who took over in 2021. The Italy, though, is on a little bit of a win streak after losing to Ireland 33-17 on August 5th. On August 19th, they defeated Romania 57-7 and then defeated Spain on the 26th 42-21. Now, granted, Romania and Spain are Tier 2 nations, so not exactly top-tier competition, but momentum going into the Rugby World Cup, Italy definitely has it. In 2019, Italy went 2-1-1. They defeated Namibia 47-22. They did lose to South Africa 49-3, and then they did not play New Zealand because of Typhoon Hagibis, so that's the draw. Italy, again, another team that has a lot of talent, but just not exactly the talent I feel that can defeat a Tier 1 nation like France, like New Zealand. If they do, it would be considered an upset. One of their veteran players, Luca Biggie, 48 caps as a hooker. Simone Ferrari, 47 caps prop. Their team captain is Michel Lamoro, who is at the back row. Monty Ione is one of the dynamic players for France. He is a Fijian winger. He had a hat trick when Italy defeated Japan 42-21. 28 years old. He is a phenomenal player. Stephen Barney is a young scrum half who has a lot of potential along with Martin Page-Rello. Their fly half is one of their most experienced players, Tommaso Allen, and then Angie Kapsula and Pablo Garbisi, two very young players, fullback and fly half respectively, who, again, there's a lot of young talent in Italy. They can play really well, but defeating Tier 1 nations, that's going to ask a lot of Italy. Moving on, Uruguay, ranked number 17 in the world rankings, nicknamed the Los Teros. Uruguay is one of those countries, they're probably the second best, arguably the second best South American rugby team, right behind Argentina. They've always been trying really hard to defeat their older brothers in Argentina, and they've really come a long way. as a rugby country recently. They've really shown a lot of skill. First and foremost, qualifying for this Rugby World Cup by defeating the United States in a heartbreaker, best of 2 games after USA defeated them in game number 1, 19-16. Uruguay came back to dominate in the second game, 34-15, in order to qualify for the Rugby World Cup as the America's number 1 spot, which put them right here. Right now, their head coach is Esteban Meneses, who's been head coach since 2015. I believe he will step down after this Rugby World Cup. He did coach Uruguay in the 2019 World Cup, where they went 1-3. Their one win was arguably an upset victory over Fiji, 30-27. Their first Rugby World Cup win since 2003. And then they went on to lose to Wales, Australia, and Georgia. So again, Uruguay, I'm not expecting too much from them in this game. Some nice players. Again, they have a good roster of veterans and young players. One of their veterans, Matteo Sanguinetti, 79 caps under him as a prop. Ignacio Dadi, he is a dynamic player at lock, 54 caps. Herman Kessler, 61 caps as a hooker. Lucas Bianchi is their back row. Felipe Echevert, a young fly half. And Andres Velasquez is their captain. 75 caps, one of the veteran players in center. Moving on to Namibia, number 21 ranked team. Namibia, a small country in South Africa. Big rugby nation. Head coach is Alistair Coetzee, who is a former South African player. He was also the head coach of South Africa briefly from 2016 to 2018 before stepping down and then coming in to coach Namibia in 2021 for this Rugby World Cup cycle. In the 2019 Rugby World Cup, Namibia went 0-3-1 draw due to Typhoon Haribas. They lost to Italy, as I mentioned before, 47-22. They lost to South Africa. They lost to New Zealand as well, and then they drew with Canada. Recently, Namibia, they lost to Uruguay 26-16 in August 5th, but then August 12th they defeated Chile 28-26. So again, a little bit of momentum going in for them. The Namibia roster, though, if you're a Major League Rugby fan, there are a few names that you may recognize. Adrian Bussen from Dallas, who plays for the Dallas Jackals, 24 caps, is a back rower. Ryan Conradi, who is part of the reigning MLR champions, the New England Free Jacks, 26 caps, is a back row, as well as Leroux Milan, who will get his third cap if he goes into the field for Namibia. He's a center, played for New England. And then Damian Stevens, probably the most popular Namibian player from Major League Rugby. Scrum half, 34 caps for the NOLA Gold. Other players to recognize, Johan Diesel is their co-captain at center with 33 caps. Tien Swampole, who I recognize because Tien Swampole is a great player who's played in Super Rugby in South Africa for the Lions group. He plays fly half. And then Herman Eggebang, I believe he had a couple of matches in the Dallas Jackals. This will be his debut if he comes on to the pitch for the Namibian team as a Namibian national. So, again, in this pool, not a lot of drama for this one. The only drama will be in the very first game, September 8th, New Zealand versus France. This game will obviously determine who will finish at number 1, who will finish at number 2. So it is a very important game. But after that, it's pretty academic. I don't see New Zealand or France losing. So both of these teams will be coming out of pool number A. Pool letter A should not be an issue. This is the only pool where it's pretty easy to predict which two teams come out. It's just which one will be 1, which one will be 2. Again, with the loss of Roman Ntamack, I believe even though New Zealand did lose to South Africa, I think New Zealand will have enough. France does have home pitch advantage, so that does make it interesting. I still think New Zealand will probably win that game. But again, by the time France makes it into the knockout stages, they'll get a couple of players back from injuries, so France will be a completely different beast going into the knockout stages. So, again, guys, Rugby World Cup kicks off September 8th with this New Zealand versus France game, 12:15 p.m. kickoff time on Friday, Pacific Standard Time. And again, if you miss it, you can always watch it on demand on the Peacock Network, one of the great subscription services if you're a rugby fan, because not only will they have all of the Rugby World Cup, They also have the HSBC Rugby 7 series. They have Six Nations. They have Premiership Rugby. Lots of great rugby available on Peacock. So again, guys, thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you on the pitch.